We measure empires by territory, by the size of land on maps, by populations conquered, by armies deployed, by resources extracted. The bigger the territory, the greater the empire. Rome, Mongolia, Britain, vast lands, millions of subjects, global dominance. This is how we think power works. Except 15th century Portugal proved otherwise. Proved you don't need vast territory. Don't need massive populations. Don't need endless armies. You just need control over the narrow passages between the territories others own, the choke points, the bottlenecks, the unavoidable routes that connect everything. Control the doors and you don't need to own the house. Control the flow and you don't need to own the source or destination. Portugal was small, edge of Europe, limited population, limited resources. Couldn't compete with Spain, France, or England in traditional conquest. Couldn't field massive armies. Couldn't occupy continents. So they invented something better, something more efficient, something more profitable. The route empire, the logistics monopoly, the world's first supply chain weapon. This is finance through time. And this is how a tiny nation held the world hostage, not through conquest, through controlling the invisible threads that connected everything, through taxing movement, through weaponizing geography. And why every supply chain crisis you experience today follows the exact playbook Portugal invented 500 years ago. 15th century, European powers fighting over land, over cities, over provinces, massive armies, prolonged sieges, expensive warfare for incremental territorial gains. Meanwhile, spices from Asia reach Europe through long, complex routes, through Middle Eastern merchants, through Venetian traders, through multiple intermediaries, each taking a cut, each adding cost. Spices arriving in Europe at astronomical prices, making fortunes for those controlling the route. Portugal looks at this system, sees the inefficiency, sees the opportunity, realizes something fundamental. You don't need to grow the spices, don't need to own the land where they're produced, don't need to conquer India or Indonesia. You just need to control the route, the passage, the unavoidable choke points between production and consumption. While other European nations focus on conquering territory, Portugal focuses on controlling flow, builds maritime capabilities, develops navigation technology, maps ocean routes, establishes fortified trading posts at strategic locations, not cities, not provinces, just critical points, places ships must pass, harbors they must use, straits they must navigate, Goa, Hormuz, Malacca, Mombasa, not massive territories, small coastal positions, but positioned perfectly at bottlenecks, at passages with no alternatives, at points controlling access to entire regions. Portugal doesn't conquer India, doesn't need to. Just controls the ports connecting India to global trade, controls the straits ships must transit, controls access. This is the choke point strategy. If you control the door, you don't need to own the house. If you control the strait, you don't need to own the continents on either side. Let others govern the territory. Let others manage the populations. Let others handle the complexity of administration. You just control the passage, the unavoidable route. The single point everything must flow through. But controlling geography isn't enough. Need to monetize it. Need to extract value from the control. Need to convert strategic position into revenue. Portugal invents the Cartaz system, the world's first maritime licensing regime. The original supply chain tax. Here's how it worked. Any ship trading in the Indian Ocean needs a Cartaz, a license, a paper document issued by Portuguese authorities, certifying permission to trade, guaranteeing safe passage, protecting from Portuguese interference. Without it, you're a pirate, subject to seizure, to confiscation, to attack by Portuguese naval forces. This is brilliant, diabolical. Portugal doesn't produce anything, doesn't manufacture goods, doesn't grow spices, just taxes movement, charges for permission to trade, makes others pay for using routes Portugal controls, privatizes profit from controlling public waterways, socializes the cost of maintaining that control through naval presence. The Cartaz costs money, significant money, but cheaper than losing your cargo, cheaper than having ships seized, cheaper than being excluded from trade entirely. So merchants pay, everyone pays, Indian merchants, Arab traders, Chinese ships, everyone trading in waters, Portugal claims. And Portugal claims everything, the entire Indian Ocean, not through conquest. Through declaration backed by naval force. This creates a protection racket, legal piracy, institutionalized extortion, pay for the Cartaz or lose everything. Portugal becomes the gatekeeper, the toll booth operator, the entity that produces nothing but extracts value from everything that moves. The original logistics monopoly, the first supply chain tax. And it's incredibly profitable. More profitable than conquest, than colonization, than traditional empire. No need to administer vast territories, no need to govern populations, no need to manage complex colonies. Just maintain naval presence, enforce licensing system, collect fees, pure extraction without administrative burden. The system was optimized, efficient, ruthless. Portugal controlled maritime choke points with minimal resources, extracted maximum value with minimal investment, Dominated global spice trade without growing single spice plant. Perfect system. Until it wasn't. Because optimization creates fragility. The more efficient a system becomes, the less redundancy it contains. The less flexibility. The less ability to adapt when conditions change. Portugal's empire was perfectly optimized for one scenario. For controlling known routes with available technology. Change either variable and the system breaks. Dutch and English figured out the routes, built their own ships, developed competing naval capabilities. Suddenly, the passages weren't monopolized. The choke points weren't exclusive. Multiple powers could navigate the routes, could establish competing posts, could offer alternative passages. Portugal's advantage evaporated, not because they lost territory, because they lost monopoly over movement. This reveals the fundamental truth about choke point strategies. They're incredibly powerful. Until they're not, work perfectly when you're the only one who can navigate the passage, when you're the only one with the capability, when alternatives don't exist. But once competition emerges, once others gain capability, once redundancy appears, the monopoly collapses. And with it, the empire built on controlling flow rather than owning production. Portugal's decline wasn't military defeat, was loss of logistics monopoly, was competitors learning the routes, building the ships, establishing the posts, breaking the stranglehold on movement. The empire built on controlling invisible threads unraveled when those threads were no longer exclusive, when the choke points were no longer bottlenecks, 500 years later. The technology changed, the geography shifted, but the strategy remained identical. The world still runs on choke points, on unavoidable passages, on critical nodes controlling flow. The form updated, the function persists. Strait of Hormuz. 20% of global oil passes through this narrow passage. 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, no viable alternative route for Gulf oil exports. Control Hormuz, and you control global energy prices. Not through producing oil. Through controlling the passage, oil must transit. Portugal's strategy applied to petroleum. Suez Canal, 12% of global trade passes through. Container ships, oil tankers, cargo vessels, carrying everything, connecting Asia to Europe. One canal, one passage. Block it, and global supply chains seize. Prices spike. Shortages emerge. Not from destroying production, from interrupting flow, from blocking the choke point. Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company produces 90% of advanced chips. Powers everything, smartphones, computers, cars, weapon systems, everything modern. One company, one island, one geographic concentration. Control Taiwan chip production and you control global technology, not through inventing chips, through monopolizing the critical production choke point, undersea internet cables. 99% of intercontinental data flows through submarine cables, not satellites, cables, physical infrastructure, concentrated in specific routes, landing at specific points. Cut the cables and continents go dark, not from destroying data, from severing the passage data travels, from blocking the physical choke point digital traffic requires. This is modern choke point strategy. Same principle Portugal invented, different applications. Control the unavoidable passage, tax the movement, extract value from flow. Let others own production, let others manage complexity. You just control the bottleneck. On the single point, everything must pass through, the door you don't need to own the house beyond. And it works the same way. Same vulnerabilities, same strengths. Incredibly powerful when monopolized. Incredibly fragile when alternatives emerge. China understands this, investing in belt and road, building alternative routes, creating redundancy, reducing dependence on passages others control, specifically targeting choke points, Strait of Malacca, Red Sea routes, creating alternatives, breaking monopolies. The United States understands this, maintains naval presence in every critical strait. Hormuz, Malacca, Bab el-Mandeb, not to conquer territory, to ensure passage remains open, that choke points don't become weapons against American interests, that flow continues uninterrupted. Portugal's strategy inverted. Instead of controlling choke points for profit, preventing others from controlling them for leverage. Modern warfare increasingly focuses on logistics disruption, on supply chain targeting, on breaking the flow rather than seizing territory. Because territory matters less than connection. Production matters less than distribution. Owning resources matters less than controlling routes. Portugal proved this 500 years ago. Modern powers are relearning it, some faster than others. The chip shortage revealed this. Taiwan produces the chips. But production means nothing if distribution fails, if shipping containers don't move, if ports are blocked, if routes are disrupted. The most advanced production capacity becomes worthless when logistics fail, when the choke points close, when flow stops. This is why supply chain resilience dominates strategic thinking, why reshoring manufacturing matters, why redundancy trumps efficiency. Because optimized systems are fragile systems. Single points of failure are vulnerability. Choke points are weapons. And Portugal taught the world how to weaponize them, how to extract value from controlling flow, how to build empires on passages rather than places. This is finance through time. We follow the money to show you that power flows through the routes, not the territories.